well, my opinion, and I see some of the notes made on LinkedIn. I see it's many friends' opinion as well. It's a fantastic subject, and just like to introduce it to you, to everybody on the call. The title is Reference and Master Data Management. And just to give you some, in terms of planning your month or looking at the weeks to come, we're looking at African Data Community, April 1st, 2021. We're looking at EIM managers. That's the focus today. Next week, we focus on data citizens. The following week, data management professionals, and the following after that, executives. So I did have a question in the week from somebody around, if we miss a session, will we be missing out because we're speaking to the different personas? There might be some elements that are slightly different per presentation, but is the core of the presentation going to be the same? And my advice in being involved in the webinars to date, don't miss out. There's always something, there's always many topics or many things that are spoken about in the various weeks that, although they are tailored for those personas, valuable learning points as well. So try not miss out. Great. Just to introduce your host today. Lead speaker today is Paul Grobler. Thank you very much, Paul, for your time. It's awesome to have you sharing on this great subject. Really looking forward to it. So really thank you so much for all your preparation time and all of that. Howard as well, as always, thank you so much for your guidance and steering and your inputs as well. Looking forward to hearing from you. Just your MC, Paul Bolton, I should say, PB, or I don't know, we've got to figure out a good call sign for each of us so we don't get messed up and confused. But yeah, just great to be hosting with you guys and being part of it. Looking forward to learning a lot from you guys this afternoon. So welcome everybody. Again, we are recording. So if you do miss, or you miss a point, or you have to leave early or something like that, please drop us a note on the comments section tomorrow or in the next couple of days. We'll be glad to send you the recording. Also, just please, we encourage engagement, we encourage comments, and I love to say this, arguing about data. I love that expression so much. So thank you so much again. Over to you, Paul and Howard.
Thanks, Paul. This is sort of what we've gone through in terms of the month's presentations, and you'll see this order of our personas is a little bit more logical than the first one that we presented in terms of the order. And you'll see we start with managers, and then we go to citizens, and then professionals, and then executives. And we almost find that's sometimes the order of complexity. So by the time we're getting to the execs, we really have to have our story right. And you'll see there that the execs are not really interested in when things happen, how things happen, where things happen. They just want to know, why do we need to do it and who needs to do it? So this is the elements of master data and reference data management that we'll talk through. And you'll see for this meeting, we refer to EIM as Enterprise Information Managers. I have moved away from data manager because that sounds awkward. So you'll see there that we have our Zachman type of approach with the 5 wives and 1 husband. So the why, what, where, who, when, and how. And I always like forcing myself to think about these things so that I know what it is that I'm trying to achieve and what is the message. So we'll go through these different areas, and we'll be doing all the green ticks on the EIM manager today.
Thanks, Howard. All right, I think I want to just sort of start with a bit of a walkthrough MDM system. We'll start here. We'll get to a little bit more theory, and I'll end off with telling you about what are the projects that we've done while I was working for Altron at the end. So we want to make sure that you understand kind of what it entails, what happens under the hood. But the story that I'm going to tell you is what happens under the hood, but from on top of the hood's point of view. And then we'll just try to cover the basis. And happy for anybody to interrupt me. Everybody except Howard, because when he interrupts, he asks difficult questions that I often can't answer. So please, Howard, if you do, interrupt, be considerate.
Okay. All right.
All right. So let's say we've got a CRM system, and we've got Tandi Dlamini-Sitole there, and this is a record that we have for in the CRM. And obviously, so the background here is customer centricity is so important right now, and it's just the better you know your customer, the data you have of them, the better service you can provide, right? But so let's say we've got this record in the CRM, and we also got a web application, and we've got a similar person there. If you look at the photos, she looks sort of similar. Name is almost the same, different spelling, different surname, could be because she's married, and some address information there. So nothing in here. If you just do a normal sort of match, exact match, you will miss the fact that it might be the same person. So in an MDM system, it's about trying to get past this sort of issue. Is she or is she not the same person? Identity resolution is really one of the core things about MDM. It's the most important thing that your MDM system needs to do is resolve identities, whether that's customers or employees or even products. All right. So the idea is that you need to be able to see if we've got data for the same person here. There's a series of steps that is typically performed in an MDM system. First of all, you need to have a look and cleanse your data. In other words, get it to a point where you can actually match, see if there's a better match. You need to go through a cleansing process, and then you need to go through a matching process. And then if you realize that is indeed the same person, merge those two things together, right? So now you've got MDM is about taking different data about the same entity from different areas, pulling them together, and use that as an enrichment of the data that you have. So in this case, we determined that this is indeed the same person, and now we've got a merged record. In this example, we've also then picked up, because we could match her to existing records in our systems, we also picked up that she is in our warehouse, she's on salesforce.com, and that last system there. And because we can now, because we've now merged these two record sets and we've cleansed it, we could also now link into other sources that we have. For example, the warehouse, right? And enrich it further. So looking at our other systems, there's now additional information that we know about her. Okay, because we know this is actually the Tsandi Dlamini that we had initially, we now know that she's Zulu is her preference, she's married indeed, but we still have records of her financial situation, which is single family home. That's maybe a bit of a problem, but we can relate her to other data that we have, right? So now we can see, okay, we have her husband here, she's got a sibling, we can determine her business location, and there's maybe another indirect sibling there. You see, at this point in time, if we haven't done MDM and gone through the process of trying to figure out if actually the same, and if we didn't go through the process of identity resolution, we would have been in trouble. We would have missed the fact that we already have data of her, missed the fact that we actually can connect her to other people in our database, for example, a husband and so on. Again, this is very important from an MDM perspective. Is these are one of the use cases that supports the idea of implementing it.
Sorry,
so
Paul.
sort of, yes.
Sorry. Could I ask you just a question there? Of all of these steps that you've shown us, how much of those steps are automatable? Or how much do we require the business to help us with? Because I'm assuming if you do a database match, especially on those first two records, you wouldn't really know who's who, especially from a developer's point of view.
Yeah. So Howard, I think as you have also experienced in the last while, there's been great advancements in match and merge technologies, helped by AI. I know you can see these slides are from Informatica. They are very good at doing this sort of thing. And so from connection, from cleansing, a lot of those things are actually automatable. And depending on how good your software is, you can bring in a lot of AI also to help you. But at some point, you're going to reach a stage where a human person is necessary. And that's where data stewardship comes in, right? So typically when you do your MDM systems, you'll set up thresholds to allow for a certain percentage of risk in terms of false positives and false negatives. But at some point, it's going to go beyond those thresholds, and you'll need to go to a data steward.
Right.
Which is also very important. Your MDM system is actually many things. What it needs to have is just a very good data stewardship module where your stewards can go in actually have a look at both records, make the human decision, yes, it's not the same, yes, it is, or no, it isn't, and then continue. So.
And maybe just a question to follow on, and I've seen this battle with customers have battled a lot, is do you bring all your data in that's not merged in the beginning? So you're sitting with multiple records of a customer, Satole in this situation, or how do you initiate that? Because do you want to hold on to that golden record as everyone used to refer to, or how do you do you clean it up within the master data tool, or how do you go about this?
That's actually a really good question, but I ask you to not ask me questions, right?
Okay. Yeah,
anyway,
sorry.
it's a very good question. Yeah, because I've seen it happen. Either one of those options happen in customer sites, and I think it's all about what would the purpose be for your MDM solution, the business purpose. And maybe I can go on a quick rabbit trail here, having implemented quite a few MDM solutions, either myself or in close contact with my teams. What we try to do is, as far as possible, try to find a name for that MDM solution that doesn't have the word MDM in it.
Right.
So, for example, we have a retail customer who wanted to implement a loyalty program. And they implemented MDM to support that effort. Now, in their case, they actually said, look, we've got a lot of data everywhere. It's of different, it's different levels of quality. The point is that we actually want to bring them into a space where we can work on them, see what it is, feel it, put it through a profiling, get it sorted out. And in their case, they actually brought it in so that the MDM system can take care of the cleansing process. But even then, you can do it in two ways. You can either bring it in and run some processes inside the MDM system, or in your ETL process, or when you move the data from elsewhere into the MDM, you can apply it there as well. A lot of it is based on what software do you have available to help you, what kind of systems have you already invested in, and how savvy are your stewards? Are they actually able to be involved in this process, or you're just relying on consultants? There's a cost factor to that as well. So I don't know. I've seen both happen.
Okay, so we have two questions, and I'm fortunate that it's not just me. So I think Maz was the first one. Maz?
I just wanted to add on to what Paul was saying, that before you even embark on MDM, it is important to have those data quality initiatives within your organization, so that you have a sort of an understanding of your data. Because if you do not understand your data, MDM is not going to solve your issues.
Right.
Yeah, so then it becomes important to have those base data quality initiatives within your organization. Then the MDM tool can address some of those business challenges that you have, because at least you have a basic understanding of your data from a quality perspective. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That makes sense. And then we've got one other question. Sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. Anura.
Hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anuradha from India. You can call me Anu.
Okay.
So in relation to the single source of truth, I would like to know, we are comparing the two records and then merging the demographic details. So when I was working with my previous client in a population health management company, we were quite confused in terms of what we do about the clinical details in the record, like the medications prescribed, the allergies recorded, what would happen, which one to retain, which will be the primary record and which would be the secondary record. So how do we go about handling this?
Without knowing too much of the detail, it sounds like that's not necessarily a technical problem, right? That's more of a requirements problem, unless I understood it incorrectly. And actually, we find that quite a lot. We find that actually today I had a meeting with potential clients where we discussed some options for them, and it soon became apparent that actually the real problem there is not the technology or not the technical threat of just a big technical implementation. It's really about the business rules that's not yet clear, or that it's a difficult political landscape. So just to get consensus among the groups will be difficult to get. So I'm not sure if I got your question right, but that sounds to me like a not like a technical question. It's more like a business question.
So Paul, it's an interesting one, because also you'll find that when one builds these master data systems, you then go back to the source, and in some cases, for a series of columns, you can choose who is the authoritative source for that master data. And so typically what I've done is allocate, let's say you've got 250 columns, you'd be saying column 1 to 10 comes from, this is the, what I've used, people use as the term authoritative source. So the definition, the pure definition of authoritative source is the source system that provides the master record of that.
Yes. Yeah, quite right. I mean, we're talking about survivorship now, right? So survivorship rules, where when you bring in data from multiple sources, you favor one system over the other,
Yes.
but you figure it per field or per attribute.
Yeah.
But there's still, I think a good MDM system will make it fairly easy to implement the idea, but to actually figure out which one you want to use in which circumstance is going to be a lot of white.
And that's what that authoritative is.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Anu?
I knew. Thanks, Howard and Paul. So I understand that some level of user discretion needs to be there in terms of who understands the domain and decides like what data need to get into the single source of truth. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. If I think about our projects, we will talk about that later a little bit, but MDM can fail really easily, right? And if I think about our own projects that went through difficult times, delays and so on, it was almost never that the implementation took longer than what we expected it to be. It did take longer, but it was because that once you actually traverse a road and you go down into a solution, you start to implement something, and you haven't thought through all the questions or options and whatnot, you'll hit that or something like that. And that point in time, you'll get clarity from your users only then, and that often means that you have to rework or redesign or whatnot. And almost always it's something like that. It's something that there's a lot of pressure. We need to get this thing in. We can't delay any longer. Let's go. But then perhaps not all the design work has been done, not all the analysis and the business analysis has been done. So we just find that often happens as well. So yeah, I think it's related to this. So just a very quick summary. If you've been staring at the screen for a while, so I think you get the idea. To implement a good MDM system, you're going to hit one or more of these things. You need to connect your data. In other words, you're looking at integration. Cleaning has a lot to do with how well you understand, as somebody else has said before, and know how to clean it and what does good data quality look like for a specific, and then going through the process. Mastering, but then you want to use it, right? You want to just, mastering data is about the technicalities of getting it right, but you want to use it productively, either in a report or optimizing your systems or in terms of being compliant. Yeah, okay. So thanks for the discussion. Good so far.
Thanks, Paul.
All right. And now we're going to this. Howard, do you want to tell a bit through the slide?
Yes, sure. Okay, so again, we come back to the essentials and the Zachman way of looking at things, the 5 wives and a husband. Of course, we always want to start at the why. So what is our purpose? What are the strategies, the principles? And of course, when you describe principles, you've got to explain to people the implications of those principles. And then how do we achieve business alignment and add business value? So why are we doing this? And that's certainly what you've got to be selling to your execs and your management, first of all. And so that's the focus of today. Plus, the managers need to understand the what. So how do we define master data? What sort of data inventory are we doing? So give me some examples of master data domains and reference data domains. And then the other key element for managers is the organization. So are we going to build master data initially in a federated model until we get the right levels of maturity and quality, as Maz was talking about? And then do we centralize them? So how do we progress over time? Sometimes due to the failures, and we'll talk about that failure rate later on, we may need to get our information sorted out before we start to centralize. And then, of course, it's about integration. And then the other aspect is choosing your third-party reference data. That's always a tricky one we talk about with addresses. And I always like the difference between the UK in terms of their postal codes and things like that. You almost get close to a door level, whereas in South Africa, you've got a massive area on a postal code. So who's going to give you data that they are really keen on keeping up to date? Whereas I'm sure with ourselves, other than KYC, address information, and I'm talking financial services, address information is rather painful, but KYC is certainly increasing the view on that. And then who are the right people to go to? So do we go to ISO? Where do we get the data? Where do we get a list of currencies? Where do we get a list of company or countries and stuff like that? So those are the three areas that we will be focusing on today. And then in different areas, we'll talk about the who and the when and the how, but that we'll talk about later on. Okay, so this is something that we will be helping people with and presenting. This is Veronica built a mind map while she was doing all the preparation for the CDMP. And we are doing a lot more and bringing icons and images. So we got almost everything about what the DM box says about master data and reference data on one page. So we talk the introduction, definitions, goals, essential concepts, reference data, master data, data sharing, important, and then what are the different types, activities, that's the context diagram, what are the appropriate technologies, and how would we implement a reference data and master data system. So that's an overview, and we were talking a little bit today about preparing for your CDMP exam. One of the things we like to suggest to our people is read the chapter, then read the summary notes, and make sure you can explain the summary notes in terms of the chapter, then go to the mind map, and you can explain and you can basically test yourself and your understanding on the mind map. And by the time you've got to then answering questions, you really got a good understanding of the aspects of reference and master data. Chapter 10. Yours, Paul.
Sorry, guys. There's some questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to just look at them. But then...
Okay. All right. So let's look at the first one. Question 1: how will this differ from a data warehouse or creating a customer data mart where we can ingest data from several sources and make one true record? Paul, do you want to handle that one?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So I think what a lot of people sometimes forget is the difference between the master data management and master data usage. I'm going to quickly jump to a slide here.
Yeah.
So this is one of the demo slides that I found just really helpful. And what I want to focus on right now is if you have a look here at these two blocks, right? On the left-hand side, you've got enable and maintain, and on the right-hand side, you've got use and enhance. So what the questioner asked is sort of referring to this side. So in data warehousing, it's been happening for a very long time. There's always obviously a need to get that right from a warehouse perspective. Get your dimensions right and so on. And getting this idea about the golden record. And you've applied similar techniques in your ETL process from the sources until you get there. master data management is about the upstream process of actually creating a discipline around that. So in a data warehouse context, you're getting source data and you're putting it there and it goes through a process, but it's all sort of automatic. You still need to deal with fallouts and errors and so on, but an MDM system is there so that you have you have a proper abilities and platform and functionality available for various people to actually help that process. You've got data stewards who concentrate on making sure that they understand the business rules and how that applies to the data quality rules on it, and then how to implement those sort of things. So MDM is not just one system. It is, obviously you get MDM software, but it's always part of a bigger ecosystem. And master data management, what we're talking about today, is about this part here. It's what I alluded to earlier as well. If you don't do your master data management well, you will run into problems on this side, and you'll have to deal with that stuff anyway. But it will be a less mature and potentially a more problematic way. So when we get to master data usage, or your analytics and data science and whatnot, anything on this side, this part talks to the actual getting benefit, getting usage from your hard work that you put in here. But this stuff is about the discipline and the process and the people, the organization that is required to get this right and to use it. So I'm hoping that helps a little bit.
Yeah, Paul, if I could add to that, is one of the things I find, and I must admit, I started BI in 2005 and I learned about master data in 2011. And I cursed the fact that I'd wasted so much time in data warehousing trying to fix the hierarchies, trying to ensure the quality of the data of the dimensions, and realizing that there was a whole set of activities that one should be doing within master data management. So the quality master data management is really good at establishing that golden source that is really helpful for the data warehouse, really in a way just to be able to scratch its dimensions and reload. And version management and control happens at the master data, which is really geared towards that, whereas data warehousing, there's a lot of programming and stuff like that has to take care of it. So that's question one. If we go to question two, I'm a little bit cautious of the time. It says sometimes the version of master data will vary from one line of business to another, and that is our core problem. Is when you bring it in across, when you consolidate this data in a data mart across the different line of business systems, you'll get different records for the same customer, and then you'll start to have recon problems across the two, and that's where it becomes tricky. So it is a lot better to then make sure that you've achieved that golden record single source within a master data system that's geared for the quality and the merging, whereas this is the type of thing you'd have to programmatically achieve in a data warehouse. I'm not sure if you agree with that, Paul.
More helpful golden record, because I think there are scenarios we've run into where quite legitimately, a slightly different angles, slightly different, large overlap of common fields, but you add some fields to the one profile and others to the other. Because of things like that, I think maybe a golden profile is a more helpful concept. But the software that we use, EBX, it's a EBX tool in particular, is actually very good at dealing with this sort of question, where you have versions, dataset versions, literally like that, where you can, depending on the scenario and the rules, you can actually refer to one or the other, but they still inherit from the same structure, from the same model, and even share some of the same data, but in certain cases you can override. The system is not a database. People use a database I mean, it's obviously built on a database, but the point is, it's not just a set of tables. In an MDM system, there's data versioning. There's different data sets. That's also not the same as data versions, right? There's the data stewardship processes that you need to get them aligned. So there's a lot more to an MDM system than just, okay, we've got a database with data in it and we get it from various places. Do you agree with that, Howard?
Yes, I do. Sorry, Paul. I think maybe we should get through and we can handle some of these questions afterwards. But I think we're running quite late, or quite behind. And I wanted to. Those case stories and case studies were quite insightful. So,
all right, guys. So, if we just get rid of the bare, all the noise, and we boil it down into its essential components, then master data, looking at the left here first, is basically just what is it? What is master data? Master data are these three things: people, places, and things. People, i.e. customers, patients, employees, things like that. Places, locations, contact points, telephone numbers, and things, products, charts of accounts, reference data, I guess could be here, could be there. But master data are all your nouns in a sentence. It's all the subjects of your insights and analyses. Right? So what does it mean in MDM, at least, to manage that? Dumbing it down really to its essential core. Master data is about people, places, and things. One of those three things. And the management thereof is about getting it, curating it, and sharing it. It's really about that. At the end of the day, you want to get data about these things into a space where you can match and merge them, clean them, relate them, fix data quality, so that it could be shared, i.e., BI system to comply to things like privacy laws and things like that, or optimizing your processes. So it's really about this, and I think it's just a nice sort of summary of what MDM really is. All right, I'm hoping you could hear me better there.
Yes, we can.
All right. So to get all these things done, you need to have the right kind of organization and ownership and so on in mind. So Howard, why don't you take us through this, please?
Okay. All right. So certainly when I work from a governance point of view, and I always like dealing with my organizational construct and my operating model at a governance level. And once you've got that right in terms of understanding your decision mandates and whether you're going to go centralized or federated, then you can start looking at the ownership paradigm, which is very clearly what master data needs. They need a person or a set of people that are responsible for ownership of the data or the domain. And then once we've got that, we go to stewardship. So all I wanted to say here in this section is, don't think that you can deal with the way in which we steward, the way in which we own, and our operating model, our organizational structure in three different areas. Your choice at the top level affects your lower levels. All right, so make sure you're dealing with all of those levels at the right time. Don't just go into let's choose an ownership paradigm, which is the next slide. Paul, if you go to the next slide. Here we see our ownership models, and these are just a set of guidelines that one can choose, and you can choose a paradigm to agree your ownership. And you may have, by domain, you may have different paradigms. But what I like to do from a data governance point of view is, within a domain, within my subject area model, I'd like to then describe that we'll choose the paradigm for ownership within this domain is a creator. So the person that creates the data. And if you've looked at the data architecture, you'll see they have a CRUD diagram, which is create, read, update, and delete. And you would go after the create. And I really like to start with the CRUD diagram to say, okay, these are the people that create. They would be the best people to get good quality data, but sometimes they're not interested in good quality data because they've got to get the customers in and they've got to get billing. So that will sometimes complicate it. So those are your different paradigms: creator, consumer, compiler. I find a lot of the time the person doing the report, they're the right people to take the ownership, but it changes. So there's no one size fits all on this, and each area needs to be looked at, and your company. Next slide, Paul.
Yeah, I find these paradigms just so interesting, because it's almost like, you know, the culture of the organization would favor one or two of those, and that's kind of just how it then happens.
Yeah. And I like this. Just the other day, I was preparing on a data governance course, and I picked up this revised ownership. So they talk about the data originator, so the inherent rights of the person that creates the data. And then we have primary data owners, and then we have co-owners, and also of enabled parties. So that's what some people refer to as a micro-share data ownership framework. And that was quite interesting. It was quite challenging for me to look at that co-ownership, because that's what happens when you federate it. You've got to work out how do you establish co-ownership. And then we actually created, in one of the customers, we created what we call a coordinating data steward. So we knew we were going to go federated. That means that we were going to have multiple owners. That meant that we needed a coordinating data owner to handle all of that, those complexities. All yours, Paul.
Cool. All right. So basically, once we know what the organizational sort of paradigm is, the culture, and what operating model we want, the next sort of level after that is how are we going to do MDM? You know, just in simple terms, in what way are we going to structure our thinking around MDM and our systems? There's basically 5 standard styles or approaches or stewardship models. And the first one is if you go do MDM by domain. So this is maybe you've maybe heard the word 360 view of the customer, or single view of the customer, or employee 360 or anything like that. That's typically when your MDM thinking is structured around domains. And these are examples of them, right? So you also typically have a group of data stewards, or perhaps one person that looks at all the data in the domain. Now, before I continue, it's not always this simplistic. For example, if we go to the next one is functional area. Sometimes you get a bit of a two-dimensional, sort of crossover. So you have both domain and functional area, for example, or department. If you've got a big organization, it might actually land like that. But the second approach or style is the functional area. So it's typically groupings within your organization that then sort of build stewardship around the data. It can be like, for example, the sales department or the finance department or marketing. It's valid, but each one of these have their pros and cons, and there's actually quite a lot to say about these. Just a whole presentation on it, and it's so important to get right, because when we do new projects, we take our customers through a workshop or two, just going through these things, explaining the big pros and cons, and then really feeling this is as much an art as it is a science. You can have wonderful ideas about how things should be, but if your organization is either immature in their thinking or it has a certain culture, it's going to be a lot better to try to find the style that would most easily fit and fall into the culture of the organization. Another such example is the process-driven approach. So, for example, if you've developed all your processes or mapped them out in something like ARIS or Casewise, that already means the organization is good with their business architecture, and they already think in terms of process. if that's the case, then an MDM approach according to process might be your best bet. This is where you take a process, for example, employee onboarding, and instead of taking employee as a domain, and things like HR as a domain, well, as a functional area or a department, you actually take the process and you deal with those pieces of data. For example, you don't deal with the whole of the employee. You only deal the data set. You only deal with employees that the employee data that's relevant to the onboarding. And you take it process by process, and as you take the next process, you expand on your models, and you include more data in your design. So process-driven is one. Other one, fourth one is, but I think most of our customers, when we chat to them, especially the bigger, older organizations, often land here, or this is where they start. This is where their current culture has taken them. I remember doing some work at an insurance company, and I was talking to the business analyst and so on, and they can't speak to you without using mainframe codes in their normal business speak. You know, the systems that they used is just so entrenched into the business language of the organization. It's almost impossible to separate those two things out. So sometimes people start here, but I would argue it's not the ideal place to aim for. You want to aim for maybe for a domain base that's your most. You need to be also most mature. You can't just go to a domain-based system or a domain-based culture. You need to kind of get there with increasing maturity. But often people sort of start with a system model. And the last one is.
Paul, sorry, Paul, just to confirm there that I've seen so many times where in procurement systems where the vendors and that is a real mess. And so they try to fix that on its own, and hence you start getting these system-based.
You get the big ERP vendors. They do kind of take over your business, not necessarily in a bad way, but everything becomes about around making the system work. It's a big part of the energy of the business users is about actually getting that right. So this is a pretty common one. And then project-based is obviously not what you want to aim for. But sometimes you kind of just start with a stewardship and you bake that into your MDM project. For the duration of the project, you also take care of temporary stewardships or getting your data governance committees and your forums and things right. And so you kind of bake those things into your project until it can be handed over to a business. But if this approach is taken, it's very important to take the business with you right from the start. But we also find this is pretty common. And while a new system is being implemented and everybody's trying to find their feet and not quite sure how things might work and how things play out, okay, so you have a project-based approach to help you get along. And so these are the 5 basic styles. And again, typically, you don't necessarily have to land on one of them. Often it is, if it's a big organization, there's often 2 that you kind of mix, so just overlay onto each other. But these are the 5 styles. All right. I'm not sure if there's any questions. Just interrupt me. I can't see the chat.
I think we're going to have to make a move, Paul. So.
All right, almost done. So let me just end off by telling you of one of our interesting projects. This was an Ultron project. The technology was EBX. And we had a very good consultant working on this. It's one of Howard's favorite people in the world. So anyway, in this project, it was for Anglo, and in this project, they bought at that time they bought a new mine, the Mototolo mine, and what's interesting is they obviously Anglo is a big place, right? They buy lots of things, lots of engineering equipment, lots of things to support them in mining operations, and being Anglo, they've got long lists of vendors, long lists of the things they buy, and they know who they buy from. But once you expand like they do, and you buy another mine, you're basically also buying another set of data that came along with it. You'll see a picture of a dog here. I didn't know this. This was really interesting for me. Did you know that one of the product list was dog food, because they keep dogs in some of these mines and pest control and things like that. Dog was on their list. All right, so like you can see there 140,000 items was in the database, over 3,000 vendors providing these things. So now I sit with this knowledge, which products do I buy from whom, and should we think, my vendor contracts. Can I actually even compare the products, the items from the different vendors and my different data sets, because they're not classified the same. What do we need to do to get a grip and just get orientate our minds around two sets of vendors, two sets of products? I mean, I'm simplifying it. This is a complex world. How do we optimize? How do we find cheaper ways to buy what we need? Should we compare and do a bit of a vendor shootout? All of these things you can't do without the help of an MDM system. All right, so typically, just in short, when you do something like this, the very first thing you want to do is to make sure that you get your data into a usable format, and that you classify your products in the same way, so that you don't try to compare an apple to a pear, and you rather compare apples to apples or dells with dells. So classification is a really important thing. If you do have questions about this specifically, chat to me. We've done a similar thing for MediClinic. But using MDM, we could load the data into a single set, take it through cleansing processes, take them through a classifications system to actually make them comparable, and then you can deal with the data. Right? In MDM, remember, managing master data is different from the usage. The managing part of that was not trivial, and this is one of the places where MDM is being used to solve the business problem of vendor optimization, procurement optimization, analysis around products, prices, who can I buy what from whom, and things like that. All right, I think we've spoken through this one before. And maybe I can end off with these last two slides. So after all of this, why would you do MDM? You're gonna do it for one of these three reasons essentially. You want to either implement MDM to comply. You're going to do it for GDPR or PAPAIA reasons or something like that. Or you want to optimize your operations. In other words, standardize your lookup codes for your different ERP systems, improve a process or whatever. Or you want to enable better analytics and just making sure that your data is clean and wide and tidy. And if you don't know what that means, you must come join our next training session on this stuff. Another very quick story, and then I'll end off. A while ago, we were asked to do an MDM readiness assessment for a major investment bank in South Africa. And they didn't have a single view of their local and their global customers at the time. It was a bank that had operations here and elsewhere in the globe. And we talked to them about this, and they wanted to keep them separate. They didn't follow our advice. I don't want to sound glib here, but we did recommend that they should be, thinking about it differently. But we left it there. And a few years later, I was asked to do a presentation at SARB on data quality. In my research and preparation for that project, I just saw that the bank actually fined 60 million rand for the lack of coherent customer information. And I just found that very interesting. And it just shows you the importance that if you don't give attention to these things, negative consequences. However, without focusing on the fines and so on, I think just if you think like this, if you think you can't or you don't want to have a coherent view of your data, you're really missing an opportunity for customer experience. You're missing an opportunity for lost. That's ignorance by design. You don't want to have ignorance by design. And so, yeah, I think let's stop there and take a few questions. So, does this make sense? Have any of you guys maybe tried to go down this route already, or are planning to go on an MDM route? Does this resonate? Does it make sense?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, yes.
So would it happen a lot that the customer, for example, wants certain things in the system, like just like extra little requirements? So they want the customer, but they also want little extra things in. That ends up being a really bigger project than just an MDM project.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I know which scenario you might be referring to. All right, so this is an important one. When you think about MDM solutions, you often get into a situation where you want to do more than just MDM.
Yeah.
We are in such a situation at the moment where we implement, we call this organic MDM versus versus a 360 kind of approach to MDM. In organic MDM, you try to follow the business and their requirements. So in other words, it's not typically domain by domain, although it could be. But in this scenario, it's actually a story that I'll tell in one of the other workshops that we're planning for this month. Is we started with a customer MDM solution, and then we went into it was for a retailer, and then we went into building a solution to manage this retailer's store operations. In other words, from when a store opens, from when it is planned, while it's being built, stocked, getting ready for opening doors until people can actually trade, and eventually when the store closes, that whole process. We're actually busy optimizing and implementing a solution for them based on MDM principles. So it's not an MDM system, actually, only. It is MDM plus other things. It's mastering store data, but it's also dealing with the processes around the opening and the closing of stores. Now, typically, this is not done in a traditional MDM sense, but if you have a good software package that is actually good with data management in general, as opposed to just MDM, you can very, very easily accommodate requirements like this. And in this particular case, I can actually just mention TIBCO is brilliant for that. EBX. It's a good data management platform where you can literally follow the business in the requirements and actually build it. Other systems which are more 360 orientated will give you a head start and an accelerator on certain domains, like for example the 360 customer view or a 360 product view. Also a lot of merit in going that route, and that's a whole discussion around organic MDM versus a 360 approach. I mean, there's more, but essentially you kind of have to make a decision around those two. Oh, it's an important question, let me put it that way.
Okay, Paul, so there were a couple of questions that were asked on the LinkedIn group and things like that. So one of the ones that have always fascinated me was the challenges that you face in running and delivering a successful master data project. Can you sort of maybe highlight some of the reasons for it going wrong? Why do we battle to win on the master data now? And a few of the occasions, what I've seen is master data becomes another pile of bad data and almost impossible to manage. And then, people are turning around and saying, well, now I tried to create another source. I've got 5 of my systems pulling data from there, but nobody trusts it. And so we've created another level of fragmentation. What's your feeling on the core reasons for master data going wrong?
Yeah, that's a good one, because MDM projects go wrong quickly, and it's got a bad rap in the market, right? I think it's getting a nice boost again because there's a lot of focus on analytics and data science, and people kind of realize, okay, we need to sort out our master data before we can actually achieve success with that. But you're quite right. I mean, just the political sensitivity around data ownership is one. And I mentioned that before. What helps with things like that is actually, again, to find a way to not call your MDM project an MDM project. So it's almost literally like that's a simple hack to get around the fact that you're actually trying to solve a business problem. So like the Anglo example, by the way, that was just a POC, but it's about vendor optimization. It's not about MDM, a party MDM that deals with employees, with vendors. We had a similar situation where we solved a procurement, or we optimized the procurement process of a local hospital, and we didn't do a product MDM implementation, and that really helps a lot to frame it that way, because MDM shouldn't be just about MDM. MDM should be about giving benefit back to the business in some way, right? So it's maybe this other slide that I showed earlier. The benefit has to come in some form or shape, and it typically kind of lands in one of these, more or less. So unless you can tie it back to something like this, it's quite dangerous. We were in a project where everything was right. If you think about the typical project, right? So in a typical project, you need C-level sponsorship. You really need support from that. You need funding. You need know-how. You need expertise. You need appetite, and you need, you just need the team to do it. And we had all of those things. The one thing we didn't have is a business case. Apart from the fact that the CIO said, look, this is a good idea, we obviously need to do it. MDM is a good idea. I mean, nobody can argue with that. Nobody can argue with good, clean data that's solid and prepared and consistent and so on. But in this case, the CIO was a sponsor, everything was right, but we couldn't tie it to a clear business case and business problem, and the project was, I would say, a failure, but it certainly wasn't a great success. So there would be some reasons.
And one of I've had experiences like this where the business people and the stewards turned around to me and said, but you're making your job mine. You're asking me to clean up the mess that you made.
Yeah.
So, as IT, we always get blamed for that bad data. And then when we say, okay, in our business, you're going to fix it for us, they're not always happy with that.
Yeah, that's true. I do see a shift, and I actually want to ask you about that, Howard, because we've had different customers over the years and also lately. But there does seem to be a shift back to the importance of data belonging to business, right? Do you find that?
Yeah.
Or there's more of a recognition that's the right way to think about it.
I suppose what I like is when I do the data strategies and I discuss the challenges that business are having with data. And there are so many times when it's just, well, you've got no master data and reference data management, and that's why you're in the state that you're in. So to fix the problem, these are the things that we've got to establish, and these are almost what I refer to as the headache tablets. Master data is one of those headache tablet type of things that you got to take before you start trying to link all sorts of other fancy stuff to.
Yeah, but I find MDM is just such a okay. Well, from a data geek point of view, it's a really interesting one because you could possibly say that from the other knowledge areas as well, Howard. But I think MDM is one where it pulls so many things together. It pulls together architecture, modeling, integration, metadata management, data quality. All of that pulls it in.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's certainly something that if you don't have a lot of maturity in place, and that's almost what I come back repeatedly is the maturity is not at the right level to go for a centralized master data system. And then it's a lot easier to start locally smaller where people see the value, they've been hurt by the lack of master data, and then get some success and then go to the big one. But when you go big, then you get politics galore.
Yeah, politics is a really big problem in MDM. And I almost think, I mean, it can't be helped. It's just, even if it's sometimes difficult for us to quantify how valuable data is, if you flip that around and you look at the political kind of divisions that data often causes, I mean, that in itself is an indication of value, right? You want to, there's certain groups that keep onto their data and they use it to their advantage. And obviously we spoke about this at another time as well, is the ethical use of data where it needs to be open and shared and so on, but there's also the ethical and legal aspect of keeping it sort of close to your chest in other areas as well, for benefit, for competition benefit or whatever. So it's just an interesting topic.
I wonder if anybody else has got any other questions. Again, we'd love to chat more on LinkedIn if you guys have got questions that you'd like answering. I'm happy to continue the discussion then.
Just a quick question to Paul. What is the longest MDM project you've run, or how long do they typically range, or are they just continuous, ongoing?
Our longest project is going on 8 years. It is one of those that was an organic MDM program that follows the business. And in fact, I will be telling the story. I'm not sure which one, maybe next week or the week thereafter. It's the MediClinic story.
Yeah.
That's also Ultron team that sits there. So I think the important thing to remember is MDM, to introduce MDM into the business is a project, but MDM itself can never be a project. It becomes part of the business as usual. So the project is just to get it in, but then it's there, and then the use of the master data gets expanded, and finds more than one application. So in the MediClinic story, I'll be telling that in more detail, but we went from procurement to doctors, standardization, to financial MDM, to identity and access management, even to areas outside of the MDM typical domains. But because we have a good software platform there, data management platform there, we actually built little small applications, including a business glossary, actually. So, but in that case, in this particular instance, our client MediClinic, they prefer to keep us on as partners, as opposed to taking that development and so on in-house. But more often than not, organizations will sort of keep that, they'll get consultants in, bring them in, and then they take it over. But other model work, most of our projects, another one that I'm thinking of is a long-term one, 4 years. But you see, it's not all project all the time. I mean, even Anglo is like that. You implement something and then you sort of get it stabilized and so on. It's being used or not, or something happens or whatnot, and you go into a maintenance mode, and then the next domains spring up and you kind of go for that. So a project is typically, I don't know, it's like, how long is a piece of string? Maybe another way to phrase the question is an MDM initiative is something that starts out as an initiative, but it needs to become business as usual. It needs to be weaved into the normal business, the life of the business.
And Paul, the other thing that I a lot of times I find that people miss is the harmonization, the post-harmonization effort. So MDM does a fantastic job of standardizing the widths and the lengths and stuff like that, but then it's about, guys, that's not where it ends. In a way, you have to go back to some of the source applications and you have to start making decisions. Do I stop authoring or creating data in those source systems because they just don't have the right control? And do I bring the authoring into a master data system? Do I get consistency of definitions and relationships? So that back-end harmonization, I don't see many people getting to.
Yeah, that's quite true. And it's tricky, right? I mean, it's tricky to decide when or in what scenarios you are actually going to feed some of the data back to. It's not a trivial process. There's lots of caveats around that.
Yeah. Risa, does that answer your question?
That was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Great. Paul Krubler, thank you very much. Really appreciate your insight and your input. Over to you, Mr. Bolton.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, Paul. It was great, really interesting. And yeah, just judging from all the comments as people have left, consensus that it was fantastic. So thank you very much for everything in the preparation and the delivery. Thanks, Howard, always. And guys, yeah, happy Easter weekend, and be safe. And we look forward to seeing you all next week, Thursday, same time, same place.
Awesome. Thanks,
Go
Paul.
well.
Howard.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Cheers. Cheers.
Bye.